The shuttle bay doors opened with a soft hiss, and 47 alien students turned to witness history. For the first time in galactic memory, a human would study at the Academy of Cooperative Sciences on Station Harmony. 7. That they expected something terrifying. Earth was classified as a Category 9 death world. The galactic database contained thousands of entries about human warriors, human soldiers, human survivors who crawled out of impossible situations covered in blood and fury. Every species present had heard stories of these creatures from the poison planet who refused to die. When Riley Cooper stepped through the doors, the collective disappointment was almost audible. The human was tall but thin, with hair bleached pale by a star and skin turned brown by the same. Riley wore simple fabric shoes that exposed the feet, carried a worn bag over one shoulder, and smiled like someone who had never experienced danger in their entire life. Counselor Thelia, director of the Academy and a member of the intellectually superior Mindari species, felt her 4 eyes narrow with confusion. The Mindari were known throughout the galaxy for their analytical minds and their inability to be surprised. Thelia was surprised. She had requested a human representative. Earth's government had sent this. Riley walked through the crowd of alien students without any apparent awareness of being watched. The human stopped to examine a decorative plant near the entrance, touching its leaves with gentle curiosity before continuing forward. A Grothian warrior named Caro stood near the back of the crowd. The Grothians were massive creatures built for combat, respected and feared throughout 12 systems. Caro watched the human approach and felt something he had never experienced before. Disappointment. Where was the predator? Where was the Deathworld survivor? This human moved like prey, soft and unaware. Caro turned away in disgust. Thelia stepped forward to greet the exchange student. Protocol demanded respect, even if the human clearly deserved none. "Welcome to Harmony, 7, she said, her voice carrying the formal tones of diplomatic greeting. The Academy is honored to receive Earth's representative. Riley smiled. It was a warm smile, friendly and open. Thanks for having me. Lovely station you've got here. Reminds me of the research facility back home, except bigger and cleaner, and without the spiders. Thelia did not know what spiders were. She decided not to ask. The orientation process revealed more disappointments. Riley's homeworld was not one of Earth's great cities or famous military installations. The human came from a place called Queensland, in a region called the Outback. Thelia's research indicated this was one of the most remote and underdeveloped areas on an already primitive planet. Why did Earth send this one? Her assistant asked privately. Thelia had no answer. The first week passed without incident. Riley attended classes, asked simple questions, and demonstrated no exceptional abilities. The human's physical scores were unremarkable by Deathworld standards. The human's intellectual assessments were adequate but unimpressive compared to the Mindari scholars. What the aliens noticed most was Riley's complete lack of ambition. The Valorans, crystalline beings who valued beauty and status above all else, found the human's simple clothing offensive. The Grothians saw no warrior spirit. The Mindari detected no hidden genius. Riley seemed content to simply exist. The humans spent free hours in the station's maintenance sections, talking with the Chirix engineers. The Chirix were an insectoid species, small and practical, generally ignored by the more prestigious races. Most students avoided their section of the station entirely. Riley ate lunch with them daily. "Why do you sit with the bugs?" a Valoran student asked one evening, using the insulting term deliberately. Riley's smile did not change. "They're interesting. Good listeners. Also, they remind me of some friends back home." The Valoran walked away, confused by the lack of reaction. That on the 7th day, something small happened that nobody noticed except one maintenance drone. The drone had been malfunctioning for 3 weeks. Station engineers had examined it repeatedly, but could not identify the problem. It sat in a corner of the maintenance bay, scheduled for disposal. Riley found it during a visit to see the Chirix engineers. The human sat down next to the broken machine, examined it for several minutes, then reached inside and adjusted something. The drone whirred to life, lights blinking in proper sequence. That a Chirix engineer named Senna witnessed this. "How did you fix it?" Senna asked, compound eyes wide with surprise. Our best technicians could not identify the problem. Riley shrugged. The power coupling was reversed. Someone installed it backwards during the last repair. Common mistake where I come from. You have machines like this in Queensland. Sort of. Different brand, same concept. My uncle runs a station out past Longreach. Everything breaks eventually. You learn to fix things or you don't survive. Senna's antennae twitched with curiosity. Your uncle's station studies what? Science? Military? Riley laughed softly. Cattle. Cows. Big animals we raise for food. His property is about 3,000 square kilometers. Just him, my aunt, and whatever workers they can find during season. Senna tried to process this information. 3,000 square kilometers. Managed by 2 humans. In one of the harshest regions on a death world. That seems difficult, Senna said carefully. Riley's smile remained warm, but something flickered behind those strange human eyes. Something the Chirix engineer could not identify. It can be, Riley agreed, but you get used to it. That night, Senna reported the interaction to the other Chirix engineers. They discussed the human extensively, analyzing every word and gesture with their collective precision. They reached a conclusion that none of the other species had considered. Perhaps the Deathworld survivor was exactly what Earth had intended to send. Perhaps everyone was simply looking at the wrong kind of danger. Senna carried the ceremonial shell everywhere. It was small enough to fit in one hand, dark purple with silver markings that spiraled from base to tip. Among the Chirix people, such shells represented family lineage. Each marking told a story. Each curve held meaning that stretched back generations. That Senna's shell was 300 years old. Riley noticed it during their second week of shared lunches. The human asked about it carefully, respectfully, and Senna explained its significance. Riley listened without interrupting, asked thoughtful questions, and never once touched the shell without permission. This was unusual. Most aliens either ignored Chirix traditions entirely or treated them as curiosities to be examined and dismissed. The other species at the Academy had formed their expected groups by now. Valorans clustered with Valorans, admiring each other's crystalline beauty. Mindari scholars gathered in study chambers, competing to demonstrate intellectual superiority. Grothian warriors trained in combat halls, establishing dominance through physical contests. The Chirix existed in the spaces between, maintaining the station systems while remaining invisible to those they served. And Riley, for reasons nobody understood, kept sitting with them. Your planet has insects, Senna said one afternoon. It was a statement, not a question. The Chirix had researched Earth extensively after meeting the human. Millions of species, Riley confirmed. Some places back home, the insects outnumber everything else combined. And humans live alongside them. We live alongside everything. Spiders in the house, snakes in the garden, crocodiles in the rivers. You learn to share space, or you go crazy trying to fight everything. Senna considered this. The Grothians say humans are warriors who destroy all threats. Riley's expression shifted slightly. Not angry, not defensive, just thoughtful. Some humans are like that. But most of us figure out that fighting everything is exhausting. Easier to understand things, work around them, adapt. This is wisdom. This is Queensland. The Grothian situation had grown worse over the past weeks. Without the Academy's previous security chief, who had retired the month before Riley arrived, Caro and his followers had become increasingly aggressive. They dominated the training facilities, controlled the best study spaces, and made smaller species uncomfortable throughout the station. The Chirix avoided them entirely. They knew their place in the social order, but some conflicts could not be avoided. IT happened during the midday meal period. The common dining area was crowded with students from all species. Riley sat with Senna and 2 other Chirix engineers at their usual table in the corner. Caro entered with 4 Grothian companions. The massive warrior scanned the room until his eyes found the insectoid table. Something cruel twisted his features. Riley noticed the change in atmosphere before anyone else. The human's posture shifted almost invisibly, shoulders dropping slightly, weight redistributing. Senna would remember this detail later. Caro approached their table directly. The other Chirix engineers froze, but Senna continued eating, attempting to show no fear. "You carry that thing everywhere," Caro said, pointing at the ceremonial shell. "It smells like decay." Senna did not respond. Protocol demanded silence when confronted by a superior species. "Let me see it." "The shell is sacred," Senna replied quietly. "It cannot be handled by outsiders." Caro's hand moved faster than Senna could react. The Grothian grabbed the shell and held it up, examining it with deliberate contempt. The other Grothians laughed. "Sacred," Caro repeated mockingly. "A piece of dead sea creature is sacred to the maintenance bugs." Riley watched. The human's expression had not changed. The easy smile remained in place, but something was different behind those eyes. Caro squeezed. The shell, 300 years of family history, cracked like it was nothing. Purple fragments scattered across the dining table. Silver markings became meaningless shards. Senna made a sound that no human could properly interpret. It was grief and rage and helplessness combined into a frequency that hurt to hear. Caro dropped the remains and walked away laughing. His companions followed, already forgetting the incident. The dining area returned to normal. Other species looked away, unwilling to involve themselves. The Chirix engineers surrounded Senna, trying to gather the fragments, knowing they could never be restored. Riley remained still. The human studied Senna with an intensity that had not been visible before. Not pity, not anger, something more controlled, more calculating. "Is this normal?" Riley asked quietly. "Does this happen often?" Senna's antennae trembled. "The Grothians have always been dominant. But this is worse than before. Since the old security chief left, they've gotten bolder." "Yes." Riley nodded slowly. The human helped gather the shell fragments, handling each piece with careful respect, placing them into a small container Senna provided. "I'm sorry about your family's shell," Riley said. "That was wrong." Senna could not speak. The grief was too fresh. That night, Riley did not return to the student quarters. The human walked through the station's corridors for hours, visiting sections most students never saw. Maintenance tunnels, equipment rooms, emergency access points. The security cameras recorded everything, but nobody was watching. Riley returned to quarters just before the artificial dawn cycle. If anyone had been observing, they might have noticed that the human smile was gone. In its place was something else entirely. Something patient, something that had learned, long ago, that the most dangerous creatures were never the ones that announced themselves. The survival training was supposed to be simple. Point 12 students would spend 3 days on Planetoid 7, a controlled environment designed to test basic wilderness skills. The ecosystem was artificial, the predators were monitored, and emergency extraction was always available. Nobody expected the power failure. Riley felt something wrong before the shuttle even landed. The humans studied the approaching terrain through the viewport with narrowed eyes, noting details that others missed. The vegetation was moving incorrectly. The ground coloring suggested recent disturbance. "Something's off," Riley said quietly. Nobody listened. The group consisted of 12 students. Riley and Senna represented the Chirix friendship. Caro and 2 other Grothians represented warrior strength. 3 Valorans would assess the environment's beauty. 4 Mindari scholars would analyze everything scientifically. When the shuttle's systems failed 2 hours after landing, the scientific analysis became irrelevant. The Academy's communication equipment went silent first. Then the emergency beacons died. Then the monitoring systems that tracked the planetoid's predators stopped transmitting. They were alone. Caro immediately tried to take command. The Grothian warrior began shouting orders, demanding that everyone follow his leadership. He pointed toward a distant ridge that seemed defensible. "We march there," Caro declared. "We establish position. We wait for rescue." Riley spoke without raising the human's voice. "The ridge is a bad idea." Caro turned, surprised that anyone would contradict him. "What?" "Look at the vegetation pattern. See how it changes color near the top? That's not a change in species. That's a temperature gradient. The ridge sits in direct exposure to whatever passes for wind here. No shelter, no water access, and we'd be visible to everything on the planetoid. The Grothian's face darkened with anger. And what would you suggest, human? Riley pointed toward a cluster of rock formations half a kilometer away. There, natural windbreak, probable water source based on the plant density, and multiple exit routes if something finds us. I'm a trained warrior. I have led combat missions across 3 systems. You're a maintenance technician from a farming region. I'm from the Australian outback, Riley replied calmly, where everything wants to kill you and the nearest help is often days away. I've been surviving hostile environments since I could walk. The group stood frozen, uncertain who to follow. The decision was made for them when something screamed in the distance. The planetoid's predators had been released from their monitoring restraints. The controlled ecosystem was now entirely wild. Riley was already moving. The human grabbed Senna and began running toward the rock formations, not looking back to see who followed. The others, driven by fear rather than logic, came after. They reached the formations as the first predator emerged from the tree line. It was massive, 6-legged, with teeth designed for crushing bone. The Grothians prepared to fight. Don't, Riley said sharply. It's not hunting yet. It's exploring. Making sound or showing aggression will trigger its attack response. How do you know this? Caro demanded. Because everything hunts the same way eventually. Movement, sound, fear. Stay still. Stay quiet. Let lose interest. The predator circled their position for 20 minutes. The Valorans trembled. The Mindari calculated odds. The Grothians gripped weapons. Riley simply watched. When the creature finally moved away, the human immediately began working. Within an hour, Riley had constructed a basic shelter using materials from the environment, identified 3 edible plant species, and located a water source in a rock depression. How do you know which plants are safe? A Mindari asked. Test them in stages. Skin contact first, wait for reaction. Lip contact second, wait again. Small taste third. Full consumption only if nothing happens at each stage. That seems dangerous. Everything is dangerous. The question is whether you manage the danger or let it manage you. Night fell. The group huddled in Riley's shelter while sounds of hunting echoed across the planetoid. The human organized watch shifts, positioned everyone for optimal rest and defense, and somehow made the terrified students feel safer than they had any right to feel. Caro watched the human work with growing confusion. You are not what I expected, the Grothian admitted during a quiet moment. That Riley's smile returned briefly. I never am. Where I come from, leadership requires strength. Dominance. The ability to destroy enemies. Where I come from, leadership requires keeping everyone alive. Everything else is secondary. Morning brought new challenges. Food had to be found. Water had to be collected. Predators had to be avoided. Riley moved through each problem with patient efficiency, teaching the others as they went. The Mindari scholars learned to observe instead of calculate. The Valorans learned to value function over form. The Grothians learned that strength meant nothing against an environment that did not care about muscle. And slowly, without anyone naming it, Riley became their leader. Not through force. Not through dominance. Through simple, undeniable competence. When the rescue shuttles finally detected their position on the 5th day, the 12 students who emerged were fundamentally different from the 12 who had landed. They had been taught by a human from Earth's harshest region. They had learned what survival actually meant. Caro was dying, and the Grothian knew it. The 3rd day on the planetoid had broken something inside the warrior. Grothian physiology was designed for explosive combat, short bursts of incredible power followed by rest and recovery. Extended survival situations required something different. Endurance, conservation, patience. Caro had none of these. The warrior sat against a rock, massive muscles trembling with exhaustion. Food had been scarce. Water required constant effort to collect. Sleep came in fragments between predator warnings. Riley approached with a container of water and several strips of dried plant material that served as emergency nutrition. Eat, the human said simply. I am not hungry. You're starving. Your body has started consuming its own muscle tissue for energy. Growthian metabolism burns fast and hard. Without input, you'll be dead within 2 days. Caro looked up at the human with something unfamiliar in his eyes. Shame. How do you know this about my species? I read your file before the training started. Basic preparation. You prepared. Riley sat down next to the warrior. I prepare for everything. Where I come from, the difference between living and dying is usually about 5 minutes of planning. The food was bitter, nothing like the protein-rich meals Growthians preferred. But Caro ate it because the alternative was worse. I was cruel to the Chirics, Caro said eventually. The words came slowly, forced through pride that had finally cracked. To Senna, the shell I destroyed. Yes, you saw it happen. You did nothing. Riley's expression remained calm. Would you have listened if I had challenged you then? Would any of your followers have supported me against you? Caro considered this. No. Power without wisdom destroys itself eventually. I just had to wait. You waited for this? For me to become weak. I waited for you to become ready to learn. A predator howled somewhere in the distance. Neither of them moved. By now, they could distinguish between hunting calls and territorial warnings. This was territorial. What makes humans survive? Caro asked. Your species is not the strongest, not the fastest, not the most intelligent, if the Mindari are correct. Riley smiled slightly. We're the most stubborn. When the environment kills us, we adapt. When predators hunt us, we learn their patterns. When we should die, we simply refuse. That is not a real answer. It's the only answer I have. Humans don't have a special power. We just don't quit. The fourth day brought a direct predator attack. One of the massive six-legged creatures found their shelter and decided the group represented food rather than threat. The Growthians prepared to fight. The other species prepared to flee. Riley did something different. The human analyzed the creature's movement, identified the way its joints articulated, noticed the slight hesitation in its approach pattern. Caro, Riley said quietly, do you see the gap between its front shoulders? There's a nerve cluster there. Heavy impact would temporarily paralyze its forelimbs. How heavy? Everything you have. Caro's eyes widened with understanding. You want me to charge it? I want you to hit it exactly where I tell you. Exactly when I tell you. Not before. Not after. The creature lunged. Riley shouted a single word. Caro exploded forward with all the power his depleted body could produce, fist connecting precisely with the target Riley had identified. The predator's front legs collapsed. It crashed forward, momentum carrying it past the group and into the rocks beyond. Before it could recover, the survivors were already running to a secondary position Riley had prepared the night before. You knew that would work. Caro breathed as they reached safety. I knew it might work. The alternative was all of us dying, so the odds seemed acceptable. Caro stared at the human with new understanding. You're a warrior. No, I'm a survivor. Warriors fight to prove strength. Survivors fight to keep breathing. There's a difference. That night, Caro helped Riley collect water. The warrior moved slowly, carefully, mimicking the human's efficient motions. Pride had been replaced by something more useful. Humility. When we returned to the station, Caro said, I will apologize to Senna. Properly. Good. Will the Chirics accept it? Riley considered the question. Senna will. The others might take longer. Trust breaks quickly and heals slowly. I understand. Caro paused. I do not understand why you help me. I have given you no reason for kindness. The human smile returned, warm and genuine. Where I come from, we help everyone who needs it. The land doesn't care about grudges, so neither can we. Someone falls, you pick them up. Someone's lost, you show them the way. It's not about deserving. It's about survival. This is human philosophy. This is Australian practicality. The rescue shuttles found them the next morning. Caro emerged leaning on Riley's shoulder, too weak to walk alone, but too proud to be carried. The warrior who had bullied others returned as someone different. He had been educated by a Deathworld survivor. He would not forget the lesson. Counselor Thelia had expected to recover bodies. The director of the academy stood in the shuttle bay as the rescue craft landed, her four Mindari eyes scanning the emerging figures with scientific precision. 5 days stranded on a planetoid with failed safety systems. 12 students from 5 different species with no survival training beyond basic orientation. The statistical probability of survival had been less than 30%. All 12 walked out alive. Thelia's analytical mind immediately noted the changes. The Grothian warrior Caro, who had dominated Academy's social structures through intimidation, now moved with careful deference. The Valoran students, normally obsessed with appearance, were covered in dirt and seemed unconcerned. The Mindari scholars, typically competitive with each other, worked together to help exhausted companions, and at the center of the group walked the human from Australia. Riley looked exactly the same as before. Calm smile, relaxed posture, simple clothing now torn and stained for survival efforts. Nothing about the human's appearance suggested leadership, but everyone positioned themselves around Riley like planets orbiting a star. Thelia observed this for several days. The survivors moved through the station as a unit, taking meals together, studying together, spending free hours in each other's company. Species that had historically avoided contact now collaborated openly. The Grothians stopped bullying. Caro personally visited the Chirix engineering section and apologized to Senna in front of witnesses. The warrior presented a new ceremonial shell, purchased with his own credits and selected with Senna's cultural requirements in mind. It was not the same as the destroyed original. Nothing could replace 300 years of family history. But the gesture represented something unprecedented. Thelia reviewed the shuttle's recording systems. The rescue craft had monitored the survivors' final hours before extraction. The director watched Riley organize the group, distribute resources, make decisions that kept everyone alive. She watched a human from a rural farming region outperform trained warriors, intellectual scholars, and every other species present. Then she summoned Riley to her office. The human arrived wearing clean clothes but the same casual sandals from day one. Riley sat in the offered chair without apparent nervousness, that constant smile firmly in place. "You deceived us," Thelia stated directly. "You presented yourself as insignificant when you arrived." "Harmless." "No, ma'am." Riley's voice remained respectful but firm. "You decided I was insignificant. I just didn't correct you. Explain. Where I come from, the most dangerous things are the ones you don't see coming. The box jellyfish that kills in minutes. The inland taipan whose venom can drop 40 men. The stone fish that looks like a rock until you step on it." Riley paused. "We learned from them." Thelia processed this information. "You deliberately appeared weak. I appeared exactly as I am. Quiet, friendly, helpful. The fact that everyone interpreted this as weakness is not my responsibility. Earth's government knew what they were sending. Earth's government sent exactly what they intended." Riley's smile shifted slightly, becoming something sharper. "You asked for a human representative. You got one. You just didn't understand what that actually meant." Thelia leaned back in her chair. Her analytical mind raced through implications. "The Academy has been studying humans for years. We believed we understood your species. You studied human warriors, human soldiers, human survivors of famous conflicts." Riley shook their head slowly. "You never studied the humans who don't make the news. The farmers, the rangers, the people who live in places where nothing should live and somehow make it work anyway. And these humans are more dangerous than your warriors. Warriors know how to fight. People from the outback know how to survive. Fighting is easy. Survival is hard." Riley met Thelia's 4 eyes without flinching. "Your academy was falling apart before I arrived. Species competing instead of cooperating. Bullying going unchecked. The social structure breaking down. You notice this? I notice everything. I just don't react until I understand the situation completely." Thelia considered her next words carefully. "You could have intervened earlier, when the Grothians were causing problems, and accomplished what? Temporary compliance through conflict? That's not how you fix systems." Riley's expression softened. "You change things by changing how people think. Caro is a better leader now because he learned the hard way. The others trust me because I proved myself instead of demanding respect. This was your plan from the beginning. I don't plan that far ahead. I observe. I adapt. I respond to what happens. The human shrugged. The survival situation was lucky timing. But something would have happened eventually. It always does. Thelia sat in silence for a long moment. Her species valued intelligence above all else. They had assumed humans were intellectually inferior. They had been measuring the wrong kind of intelligence. What do you want? Thelia finally asked. From your time here. From this exchange. Riley considered the question seriously. I want to learn. I want to help. I want to show people that humans aren't what the databases say we are. A pause. And I want to make sure nobody destroys another family's ceremonial shell because they think they can get away with it. Thelia nodded slowly. You have already accomplished most of those goals. I'm patient. I'll accomplish the rest. The director watched the human leave her office, still wearing those ridiculous sandals, still smiling that friendly smile. She reached for her communication device and composed a message to Earth's diplomatic corps. The exchange student had exceeded all expectations in ways the Academy was only beginning to understand. 3 months after the survival incident, Harmony 7 had become something new. The Academy's efficiency ratings had increased by 23%. Disciplinary incidents had dropped to near zero. Interspecies cooperation had reached levels not seen since the institution's founding decades earlier. And nobody could quite explain how it happened. Counselor Thelia understood, but she kept her observations private. Some changes worked better when people believed they had happened naturally. Riley continued attending classes, maintaining the same quiet demeanor that had marked the human's arrival. The sandals were still present. The smile remained warm and genuine. Nothing about Riley's daily routine suggested anything exceptional, but everything had changed. The Chirix engineers now worked openly throughout the station. Their expertise was acknowledged, their contributions valued. Senna had been promoted to lead a new cross-species technical team that included Grothian assistants. The Grothians themselves had transformed. Caro led their group with protective authority rather than aggressive dominance. When smaller species needed help, Grothians provided it. When conflicts arose, they mediated instead of escalated. The Valorans learned that functionality could be beautiful. The Mindari discovered that intelligence meant nothing without practical application. Riley had taught them all without ever claiming to teach anything. The garden section of the station became an unofficial gathering space. Species that had avoided each other for years now shared meals among the artificial plants. Riley sat at the center most evenings, surrounded by students asking questions about Earth, about survival, about the strange human perspective on existence. Your planet sounds horrible, a young Valoran said one evening. Everything wants to kill you. Riley laughed softly. Everything wants to survive. Sometimes it means killing. Sometimes it means cooperating. The smart creatures figure out which approach works best for each situation. And humans? Which approach do your species prefer? Both. Either. Whatever keeps us breathing. Riley picked up a small stone for the garden path, turning it over in those strange 5-fingered hands. We're adaptable. That's our advantage. We don't have claws or venom or crystal armor. We have flexibility. Senna clicked approval from nearby. The Chirix engineer had become one of Riley's closest companions, their friendship built on genuine mutual respect. The other Deathworlders are not like you, Senna observed. We have studied their representatives. They are aggressive, territorial, violent. Different regions produce different people. Riley tossed the stone gently and caught it. My part of Earth teaches patience, endurance, the understanding that most threats can be waited out rather than fought. But you can fight. We saw this on the planetoid. Everyone can fight. The question is whether fighting accomplishes anything useful. The human smile flickered with something deeper. Fighting should be the last option, not the first. Director Thelia received a formal communication from Earth's diplomatic corps on the same day. They were inquiring about the exchange program's success and requesting feedback on their representative. She composed her response carefully. You asked if we were satisfied with the exchange student you provided. I must be honest. We were initially disappointed. We expected someone impressive, someone powerful, someone who matched our understanding of Deathworld survivors. We did not understand that humans from Australia are all 3 of those things. They simply do not advertise it. Your representative has accomplished what our own leadership could not. They have unified a fractured student body. They have taught cooperation to species that had competed for generations. They have demonstrated that strength without wisdom is meaningless, and that true leadership requires earning respect rather than demanding it. We respectfully request that you send more. Thelia sent the message and turned to observe the garden through her office window. Riley was visible below, still surrounded by students, still wearing those absurd sandals, still smiling that warm smile. The other students would graduate eventually. They would return to their homeworlds and spread throughout the galaxy. They would carry with them lessons learned from a quiet human who had appeared harmless. They would teach others what survival actually meant. Riley looked up, as if sensing observation, and waved casually toward the director's window. Thelia found herself waving back. She was beginning to understand why Earth dominated Deathworld politics despite their apparent technological disadvantage. Why human colonies thrived in environments that killed other species. Why the galactic community both respected and feared these strange, adaptable creatures. Humans did not conquer through force. They changed things simply by being present. Riley returned attention to the gathered students and began explaining how to identify edible plants by leaf structure. The lesson was practical, useful, and delivered with patient humor. Nobody watching would have guessed they were learning from one of the most dangerous beings on the station. And that was exactly the point that in the Australian outback, the most deadly creatures were never the obvious ones. They were small and quiet and patient. They waited for the right moment. They struck only when necessary, and they always survived. The sun's cycle shifted toward artificial evening. Students gradually dispersed to their quarters. Riley remained in the garden alone, sitting among plants that resembled nothing from Earth, breathing recycled air that tasted nothing like home. But the humans smiled anyway. Somewhere in the galaxy, more humans were preparing for exchange programs. More quiet people from harsh regions were getting ready to teach aliens what survival actually meant. The galaxy thought it understood humanity that IT had not even begun to learn.